So here we're going to talk about the cultural world of the New Testament and appreciating, being cognizant of the various cultures that are helping the formation of the theology that's in the New Testament. So, of course, when you talk about culture, you have to ask the question, what is it? What do you mean by that term? Of course, there are many different disciplines that will engage in the conversation about culture. And these different disciplines may even have varying definitions of what is meant by culture. For myself, what I'm going to mean here by culture is I'm referring to these kind of shared beliefs, shared values, shared customs, shared worldviews of a group. Now, this can be a very large group when you want to think about Europe as a culture, or it can be national, let's say Germany as a culture. Or you can think about the United States as a culture, but then you could talk about Oklahoma as a culture. You might even talk about Edmond as a culture. You can even talk about a particular congregation having a culture. So a family might have a culture. So there is these shared beliefs and values. So usually there are multiple layers of cultures in a person's life. And so kind of recognizing these different cultures, these shared beliefs, helps to understand the conversation that is taking place between individuals in that group. In my PowerPoint notes that's always provided for you in each unit, you'll see a link that I have to a brief video about culture. And you may want to click on that link. It'll take you to a brief 2-minute video where someone is trying to describe the different levels of culture, and that might be helpful for you to understand what we're referring to. When it comes to the study of the New Testament and its theology, it's important to be aware of 3 primary cultures. That is the Semitic or the Jewish culture, very broadly speaking, the Hellenistic or Greek culture, and then the Roman culture. Now, I would like to focus here briefly on 2 very important of these cultures, and that is the Jewish and the Hellenistic. Now, the reason why is because obviously Jesus and the earliest disciples and most of the authors of the New Testament are Jewish, and they have a particular culture, specifically as Jews who are influenced in Palestine, because of course there is the diaspora Jews living in other places around the world who also have a culture that might be quite distinctive than the culture of Jews living in Palestine. So we need to just think about Jewish culture in Palestine, and we need to think about Hellenistic culture, Greek culture. The New Testament is written in Greek, and much of the writings are written to people who are living in the Greek and Roman world. And while the Roman culture is important because it's obviously a Roman empire and there are Roman influences, the Greek culture has a longer history of influencing the region than the Roman culture does, although the Roman culture is significant. So I just want to make a brief comparison between the Semitic and the Hellenistic culture. We can do this briefly like this. Hellenistic cultures highly valued their urban, valued cities. It was polytheistic, it was metaphysical and speculative. So you have a lot of philosophers who think about abstract thought. What is beauty? What is truth? So as they contemplate what is the good, what is the soul? So thinking about the nature of things. These are metaphysical conversation. They're also polytheistic in that they can believe in a multiplicity of gods, and that there are gods who are in charge or control different areas, and that people are free to worship whatever gods seem to be in control of the areas in which they live. They can be quite speculative as well, imagining things that are not real and thinking about possibilities beyond the real world. It is universal and it is syncretic. Universal in the sense that there are some things that should bind or hold all peoples together, and that there is this good in all that's present in other parts outside of Greek society itself. And it is syncretic in the sense that it tries to learn from other cultures, it tries to assimilate to other cultures, it tries to take what it sees as acceptable, pleasurable, important from other cultures, and still maintain something of its own culture. So it mixes. It likes to mix with things. So you think about the Christianity as itself. Christianity is quite syncretic in that Christianity can look very different in different parts of the world. There's something about the different cultures in which Christianity finds itself, and there are some things that stay the same. There are some ideas that are constantly there, some language that is constantly there, some rituals that are constantly there, but also there are other ways in which something of that culture is finds itself expressing the ideas and thoughts or truths of Christianity. So in some way, Christianity, like Hellenistic culture, is quite syncretic. And Hellenistic culture also emphasizes the individual's pursuit for freedom, the individual's pursuit for knowledge, the individual's value. But, of course, in Hellenistic culture, there's also a sense in which nature determines a person's class, a person's situation in life. And so there were different philosophies about the individuals and the individual's values in light of, the world and its social structure and ordering. Now compare this with Semitic culture, and here we're talking about Jewish culture by and large prior to the introduction of Hellenism, the introduction of Greek thought, Greek way of life. It was primarily rural and agricultural. Most Jews worked the land. Most Jews, farmed, lived off of the land. So they're not, while there are cities, there might be Jerusalem and there might be some other cities. Most Jews are living off of the land. Now, Semitic culture is monotheistic. They think that there's one God. Jews believe in one God who's supreme over all. And while there may be other beings that exist, angelic beings, spiritual beings, there's really only one God and only one God that should be worshipped. It's very physical in that it doesn't tend to go into these abstract conversations about the nature of beauty or the nature of the good. It wants to know, what's the good thing that I need to do? What's the good work, the good deed? It's very practical in a lot of nature. It doesn't really spend time speculating about possibilities. It thinks, no, you do this, no, you behave this way, this is the right course to go in, this is what should be done. There's a lot of particularism in Semitic culture. In other words, Jewish people did believe that they are a distinct group of people who have been called into a special relationship with God. They are God's covenant people. Not that God doesn't relate to other peoples, but that God relates in a unique, particular way with them, and calls them to live in a very particular way of life. And sometimes that way of life means isolation. It means I can't behave like the Gentiles. I have to stay separate from the Gentiles, or I can't let the Gentiles contaminate my way of life. So sometimes there was this sense of kind of a border where you try to keep at bay the influences of non-Jews. And there's this very strong sense in the Semitic culture with a community, and that is one's identity is wrapped up in belonging to community. The community kind of sets the rules, sets the norms. Individuals are supposed to be submissive to the community, protect the community. And so, when you really read much of the New Testament, we find this emphasis on community, especially through the church. In a lot of ways, salvation is thought of as a community experience in the New Testament. God saves people, and individuals relate to God in connection with their existence in a church, in a group, and gifts are given to people in the relationship with others. So the community emphasis is very strong for Semitic culture. Now, there's certainly a lot more we could say about culture and probably will throughout the course, but right now this is a kind of a brief um, look at a contrast between Greek Hellenistic culture and Jewish Semitic culture.